It was the first day of padded practice at Chiefs training camp, and a new player was on the field for the Kansas City Chiefs. That player, OWEN CARNEY, the former Illinois defensive end. The Kansas City Chiefs have made no qualms about cutting players this preseason, having already churned through two players that appear to have been on the bottom half, bottom quarter, bottom 10th of their roster. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs are in go mode for winning another Super Bowl. They are absolutely on a warpath, and we'll get to that in a minute. Real quick, guys, if you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really helps me out. And if you are here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. We have gone 510, I think, consecutive days with content on this channel. So consider hitting subscribe to stick around for more Chiefs content. But who is OWEN CARNEY, and why did the Kansas City Chiefs bring him in? There are some maybe higher order things that we're going to look at in this video, talk about in this video, because I think they're going to be important moving forward. The Kansas City Chiefs will have 3 preseason games, the first of those preseason games approaching very quickly. And the movement on the roster has been pretty aggressive. OWEN CARNEY finds himself 6'3", 275 pounds, with a 4.78 40 at his pro day, which is in the 80th percentile. His other testing numbers, not quite so impressive, probably why he went undrafted originally. He had a 4.59 short shuttle, which is in the 40th percentile, a 29-inch vertical leap, which is in the 26th percentile, a 7.55 three-cone drill, 38th percentile, and he did 21 reps on the bench press, which is 21st percentile. Now, I have Malik Herring listed here because physically, I think that is the defensive end closest to him on the roster. Performance-wise, I think that is probably the closest defensive end to him on the roster. Malik Herring goes 6'3", 280, so the same height but 5 pounds heavier. A slower 40, but that 40 for Malik Herring, again, not a combine number, so you have to... In fact, I don't think the 40 was even at the pro day. Malik Herring was injured when he came out of college. Otherwise, I think Malik Herring would have been a drafted player. Malik Herring's college career was very impressive. Now, the next note I have here is that they cut LuQuay Washington in order to sign OWEN CARNEY. And I'm going to get into the sort of maybe higher order ideas here before getting into what we can expect going forward from OWEN CARNEY. Now, they cut LuQuay Washington. LuQuay Washington was listed... OWEN CARNEY comes in listed as a linebacker. He is the classic tweener type of guy. He's not quite big or long enough. He's got 33-inch arms, which is passable, but it's not a great reach. He is 6'3", 275, not long enough to be a defensive end, too heavy to be a linebacker. I don't think he has the movement skills to necessarily play linebacker. I think that he is sort of the classic tweener that ends up at outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense. The Kansas City Chiefs do not play a 3-4 defense. He will be a defensive end here in Kansas City, despite the fact he is currently listed as a linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs. At least that is my read. I do not have any intel as to where he was playing yesterday for the Chiefs, but the Arrowhead Pride article does say that he is a defensive end, and they have representatives at the training camp for the Kansas City Chiefs, so I would imagine that he was going through drills with the defensive ends. The reason I make the note of the fact that they cut LuQuay Washington, they've already cut Trey Dean, who I thought was going to be a shoo-in to make the roster. I really did. Football guys, if you follow any of the like hardcore draft guys, they really thought Trey Dean was going to get drafted. They thought Trey Dean was going to be an NFL player. They thought Trey Dean could make an impact in the NFL. His testing numbers were awful. Trey Dean's were. That's what pushed him out of the draft. The Chiefs, through 4 days, had already cut 2 players. It would be easy. It would be very easy for Brett Veach and company, Brett Veach and the front office for the Kansas City Chiefs, for the coaching staff also, to just go ahead and coast through this training camp thinking we have a roster that has already won 2 Super Bowls. consecutively. We have a roster that was maybe sluggish through the whole season on offense, but through parts on defense, despite the fact that defense was really, really good for the Chiefs last season and the reason they made the playoffs in the first place. We cannot leave that element out. The Chiefs won the fewest games they've won in the Patrick Mahomes era last season. But here's what I want to talk about. The Chiefs had, before cutting Luquay Washington, 9 linebackers. 9 linebackers were not going to make the roster. 9 linebackers were not going to make the roster, plus the practice squad. Identifying the low man on that totem pole, which it looks like was Luquay Washington, they were able to make that cut and then move on to a different player that might have an impact, probably for the practice squad for this team. They're not sitting on their laurels. They're attacking. They're trying to identify players that will not make the cut, that will not make the practice squad early, weed them out, and then find a roster spot for someone else. They are filtering through, churning that bottom part of the roster. And it's something that we've seen Brett Veach do very, very often for the Kansas City Chiefs through his entire tenure as the general manager. It's very easy, I think, in the NFL to, like I said, sit back on your laurels. Brett Veach not doing so has been part of the reason that the Chiefs have had so many players pop up and make impacts for this team. Often, by the way, at the linebacker position. A lot of undrafted guys have made impacts for them. A lot of guys that have been on someone else's practice squad have come in and contributed for the Kansas City Chiefs. They have currently 8 linebackers. I think it is likely that's the number that they carry through the rest of camp. Where they have other excess players that might see churn, the Kansas City Chiefs currently have 8 running backs. I think 3 running backs make the roster, 1 or 2 on the practice squad, depending on how they feel about the younger guys, Carson Steele and Imani Bailey. They have 14 wide receivers. While it is difficult to imagine them cutting a wide receiver when they have so many questions at the position, I think it is possible. They currently have 15 offensive linemen. Again, we have seen a lot of action with the number ones through this training camp at the left tackle and left guard position, filtering through Lucas Niang and Mike Caliendo at that starting left guard spot so long as Joe Thuney is out. They have filtered through 2 players at the left tackle position, and they've even run Lucas Niang with some number ones on the right tackle position, which is confusing to me because I would like to see them try both Wanye Morris and Kingsley Suamataia Kingsley at the right tackle position as well, because I think that both starting offensive tackle spots might be up for grabs, though we haven't seen the locomotion at that position to really justify that at this position or at this time. I think that it may benefit the Chiefs at least to make Jawan Taylor think, hey, you've got to figure some things out. The Kansas City Chiefs also currently have 18 listed cornerbacks, safeties, and defensive backs. The Kansas City Chiefs do differentiate between corner, safety, and defensive back. So we might see some movement at the defensive back position, though Brett Veach really likes to have a whole lot of defensive backs. Now, who is OWEN CARNEY? He has practice squad experience with both the Dolphins and the Bengals, and then I stole this haphazardly from the Arrowhead Pride article on OWEN CARNEY. 116 tackles in college, 53 solo, 21.5 for loss, and 16 sacks. This is a stat line that reminds me a lot of Malik Herring. Malik Herring's college tape was probably more impressive. His college tape was going up against SEC competition, and he really excelled in the big games. That's what I'll say for Malik Herring. And we'll get back to Malik Herring a little bit later. But the strengths in his game are as such. First off, he looks like the game, all right? And the game is a very scary guy. That's the number one thing he's got going for him, in my opinion. He is a high motor player. High motor players at the defensive end position. If you're looking for someone down on your roster, the lower part of your roster, that is a good sign. That the hustle at defensive end is the sort of thing that gets a guy on the roster. He is a plus player against the run. The Chiefs have struggled against the run. I would say the Chiefs have struggled against the run more up the gut of the defense, so the defensive tackle position is in question more than the defensive end position, but it's good to have strengths if you are one of these last guy on the roster types. He's a good tackler. This also contributes to being on the roster. If he gets a clean release, he makes the play. That does not sound like a strength, but it is, because if you are someone who gets a clean release, you have to make that play, because you getting a clean release means that someone else is double teamed, or that the player who is supposed to block you, it's possible he just completely whiffs, right? It's possible he has the wrong assignment in his head and executes that assignment. Still, that takes another player out of the play. Being a sure tackler and making the play if you get a clean release is something absolutely necessary. Assignment sound football is a big deal, especially in the NFL, where if one player misses his assignment, that could be a 50-yard run, right? That could be the difference between an incompletion and a long completion and a sack. So making the play, being a sure tackler, making the play are big positives. It means you have a high floor as a player. And I think Owen Carney has a very high floor, not a very high floor. He's not a sure thing, but he has a high floor. Also, he was all Big Ten second team, or B1G. The conference realignment in college football has been nothing short of confusing for me, but he was being all Big Ten second team means that he is a performer, means that you can count on him to do things. It does not mean he is the most explosive, does not mean that he is the most impressive, but it does mean that he does have a high floor for the Kansas City Chiefs. Weaknesses: he's athletically limited. He was not invited to the combine. He was not going to show out. Obviously, we have his testing numbers from his pro day. Not quite the athletic specimen that he is the physical specimen, being 6'3", 275 pounds. He does not show his speed on the field. Remember, if we go back up here, he has an 80th percentile 40-yard dash for a defensive end. That's a good number for a defensive end. He doesn't necessarily show it on the field, and he does not have a lot of moves. He's really just a bull rush type. If the Kansas City Chiefs can add to his repertoire, he could find himself as a player that ascends onto the Chiefs roster and makes an impact in the NFL. Not a big impact. I do think that he has a relatively low ceiling. I do think he has probably an overall limited ceiling, but definitely a football player that is worth having in camp for the Kansas City Chiefs. The last couple of notes here that I have: this could mean trouble for Malik Herring. This could mean trouble for Truman Jones. The biggest note that I have here is I think that this exacerbates the worries that we have about B.J. Thompson being out for the season, maybe longer. I don't know anyone. I don't know anyone in the NFL who has had seizures and has suffered a heart attack. I hope for B.J. Thompson. I think that B.J. Thompson has a high ceiling and a low floor. I think that B.J. Thompson is someone that the Kansas City Chiefs were hoping would be able to be an active roster player for this season. I just don't know anybody that has happened to and been in the NFL. Probably I'm wrong. Probably there are exceptions to this. Probably someone has done this. I don't know that player. I don't know that player off the top of my head. I don't know that I would be able to do the research and find that player, because I don't know how you go about that research. Seizures are nothing to mess with. That's a scary situation. having a seizure and a heart attack in the middle of a group meeting. He not on the football field, in the middle of a group meeting. Probably not as scary as if it happened on the field, right? Because that's a whole different situation. But the fact that these things just happened to B.J. Thompson in the middle of a day, very, very scary situation. It is difficult for me to imagine that a future in football for someone that has medical issues like that. Owen Carney, again, is probably not right now a 53 guy. Could be a practice squad defensive end for the Kansas City Chiefs, but that would mean probably one of the practice squad guys from last year is gone. Looks like B.J. Thompson to me because of the medical issues. It could be that B.J. Thompson is able to go through this season basically as a redshirt season, a medical redshirt season, figure out, was that just an anomaly? Is this a deeper-seated physical concern for B.J. Thompson? But it might mean that Truman Jones is not performing to the level that they would hope. The reason I put Malik Herring on this list is that this guy looks a lot like Malik Herring. You bring in a guy in the kind of the second week of camp, but really by days, 5-day work week. It's the first week of camp, but they've already had a weekend, a day off from camp. So if you're bringing in a guy that is kind of a carbon copy of someone you have, oftentimes it means there might be problems for that player. I don't think so. I think Malik Herring is safe in that regard, but Malik Herring through 2 seasons has not shown a whole lot of growth. So maybe it is a bigger deal for Malik Herring than I am willing to admit. Now, like I said earlier, they have 9 linebackers, the Chiefs do. They have 8 running backs, 14 wide receivers, 15 offensive linemen, and 18 defensive backs. If we're going to see a move that is not straight up egregious underperformance from a player, right? So the Chiefs have 4 quarterbacks. I think they go through camp with 4 quarterbacks. If we see one of them cut, it's because that guy himself is just not towing the load. I think all of the guys they have on roster right now, Ian Book, Chris Oladokun, Carson Wentz, and Patrick Mahomes, obviously, are going to be on the team until the 53-man cut. But if one of them, like I said, ends up not doing that, it's because they weren't towing the load. So it's possible that we see a player cut from any position for the Kansas City Chiefs, but I think those 4 that I listed are 5 that I listed are the most likely. If we see another player brought into camp, man, you have to believe it's a defensive tackle at this point. You simply have to believe it's a defensive tackle at this point. That position for the Kansas City Chiefs is sort of a mess right now. We have Chris Jones that we know will make the roster. After that, what are we doing at the position? The aforementioned weakness at run defense in the middle of the defensive line is a concern for this team. I think that the offensive passing game woes right now, the fact that the Chiefs were not able to connect on any deep balls yesterday, is going to be a thing of the past. I think that this team will find their stride. I think that Patrick Mahomes and these wide receivers will end up in the place they want to be, which is much further from the place they are, right? But I think that they get there. If they don't, that running weakness, that defensive weakness in the gut of the defense is going to spell problems for this team. You want to slow the Chiefs down? You run the football. You want to keep Patrick Mahomes on the sidelines? You run the football. If teams are able to run effectively against the Kansas City Chiefs up the middle of this defense, it could be a problem like we saw early in the Patrick Mahomes tenure. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do on the channel, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel. dropping multiple videos every single week. And as always, look, guys, I would like to have you back for the next one. So make sure you are subscribed. And if you want to know when I post videos, hitting the little bell icon that is next to all of those subscribe and like buttons will make sure that YouTube tells you when one of these videos goes live.